It was 1993, a golden era for Brazilian football. Stars like Dunga, Cafu, Ronaldo and Ronaldinho lit up the game. But hidden in the shadows was one player who rose above them all, shining brighter than anyone else. A name few outside Brazil even knew. Augusto de Sousa. He was a perfect mix of Ronaldinho's magic tricks, Ronaldo's lightning speed, and a brilliance so rare that even Maradona once stopped mid-match just to applaud him. Brazilians gave him a title no one else ever dared to claim, the God of Dribbling. But fate was cruel. Just days after sealing his dream move to Europe, Denner's life was cut short at only 23 years old, 2 months before the 1994 World Cup. The question everyone still asks is, what would football look like if he had lived? Yet even in such a short career, his impact was so deep, you can still see it written on Brazil's birth certificates. Before he ever wore the national shirt, almost no one named their children Dina. But after his passing, everything changed. Parents across the country began giving their sons his name. And even today, countless children still carry it. That's how much Denner meant to the people of Brazil. For those who saw him play, he lives on as a memory. A shining star gone far too soon. Now look at Brazil's 1994 World Cup squad list. The very last name added was a 17-year-old Ronaldo. He didn't play a single minute in that tournament, yet simply being there gave him the exposure that launched him into superstardom. And that's why so many Brazilians believe if Denner had lived, his destiny would have been just like Ronaldo's, or maybe even brighter. Dina was born in 1971. By 1986, life had already been tough. His father had died, and at just 15, he quit football to help his mother with the bills. But fate had bigger plans. That year, a massive youth tournament took place in his hometown. And when I say massive, I mean it broadcast live on TV, with more than 7,000 people filling the stands. Bigger crowds than some professional games even today. For the schools involved, this futsal tournament was more than competition. It was a marketplace for raw talent. Scouts filled the streets searching for poor kids who could play for just a few bucks, hoping to find the next star. What happened next would change Dana's life forever. A scout just passing by stopped in his tracks. He saw a skinny kid dribbling past 5 of his friends. It was like the ball was glued to his feet. The way Dana moved was too different to ignore. Without hesitation, the scout offered him a scholarship, opening the door to a future no one could have imagined. If you love football stories that remind us what's possible, this is your home. Subscribe now, and let's walk this emotional journey together. You see, Dina was a troubled kid, so instead of showing up for school, he often skipped out, and he knew exactly how to use his talent to his advantage. He would threaten not to play unless they paid him more, turning his absence into leverage. Even as a teenager, Denner understood the power he held with a ball at his feet. By the time he got to the final, he was making more in money from futsal than he could make from a regular job. He was so good that he practically won every trophy in the tournament. His talent was impossible to ignore, and soon 2 giants came knocking, São Paulo and Portuguesa. In the end, it was Portuguesa who won the race for his signature, giving Dana his first real step into professional football. Once he joined Portuguesa, the club quickly realised there was a problem. Dina wasn't a polished academy kid, he was a pure street kid. Most nights he didn't even come home. His family would only see him during matches, just to make sure he was still alive. To teammates, Dana was the funny one, always joking, always smiling. But behind the smile was a side few wanted to see. His closest friends were into some heavy things, and little by little, their world began to rub off on him. It wasn't rare to hear stories about Dina stealing football boots or losing his temper, or getting violent on the pitch. But then, it went far beyond that. One afternoon, in the middle of a training session, something happened that stunned everyone on the field. Police stormed in, walked straight onto the pitch, and arrested Dana for armed robbery. Alongside 5 of his so-called friends, he was taken into custody. He spent 2 nights behind bars, only released after the club begged authorities, promising to keep him under control. But instead of seeing it as a second chance, Dana saw it as proof he could get away with anything. Little did anyone know this would be just the first of many moments that would define his fate. Regardless, Dana's debut was unforgettable. He impressed 2-time silver ball winner Carlos Alberto so much that the veteran asked for his shirt. But Dana, cheeky as ever, just smiled. "This is my debut," he said, "and you want me to give you my shirt? These things cost like $500. Despite how good he was on the pitch, Denner spent over 2 years playing for Portuguesa's first team without a full contract because the club was broke. Now, he didn't want to leave his childhood team, but he knew he needed a professional deal. So he came up with a bold plan. One day, he faked a transfer to Belgium, even driving all the way to the airport, just to pressure the club, and it worked. The very next day, Denner signed his first professional contract. And I would say that this paid off the Portuguesa even more because soon after signing that contract, in a Paulista Championship match, something extraordinary happened. He picked up the ball deep in his own half, dribbled past half the team, and scored what is still considered one of the greatest goals in the club's history. Right after it, one of his teammates stared at him in disbelief. What in the world just happened? Denner just shrugged. "Stop acting dumb. I score goals like this every training session." And he wasn't joking. After proving it again and again with more iconic performances, the national team came calling. On his debut, Denner was so excited to play that he stepped onto the field before the referee even told him to, so the ref made him go back and start again. And despite that clumsy first moment, it didn't stop him. He only played 6 minutes, but in those 6 minutes, he sparked a counter-attack that ended in a goal. That goal allowed Brazil to tie the match. Everyone saw the talent. The spark was there for all to see. A future star in the making. However, the tie turned after Denner missed the crucial match due to a motorcycle injury he sustained while attempting daring stunts. The media started going after him, and things only got worse. When Brazil's under-23 team failed to qualify for the Olympics, even with players like Cafu and Roberto Carlos, all eyes turned to Denner. He was the face of that team, the star, the one expected to deliver. Instead, he was branded lazy, immature, unreliable. And as harsh as those criticisms were, they only showed how great he truly was. Fans expected so much from him. And just maybe they had a point. Because while researching him, I came across an interview with his aunt. She recalled that, despite how brilliant Denner was on the pitch, she often worried about his lifestyle. Denner was the kind of kid who believed 3 hours of sleep before a match was enough. Imagine how shocking that would sound if a professional player said it today. But for Denner, this was simply part of his routine. And although the media raised concerns about his choices, it became increasingly clear that Denner's unwavering commitment to his game and his unconventional way of living made him a subject of both admiration and criticism. There were times when he'd stroll into training late or skip it entirely. In one match against Santos, things hit another level. The day before the game, no one knew where Denner was. The entire club panicked. The manager even made a backup plan, preparing for the worst. Then just 1 hour before kickoff, Denner strolled in, calm, smiling, as if nothing had ever happened. Coming into the match, he struggled. Nothing seemed to click. By half-time, Portuguesa were already 2-0 down. The manager blamed Denner and told him he'd be substituted. But Denner looked him straight in the eye and said, "I decide when I leave the field." The whole locker room went silent. They sensed something was about to happen. And they were right. Because just half an hour later, Denner led Portuguesa to a stunning 3-2 comeback. His final goal was breathtaking. A nutmeg on the first defender, blistering pace to glide past the second, then a cool dribble around the goalkeeper before slotting the ball into the net. It was an iconic moment. After the match, he turned to his teammates and said, "I am Denner, and everyone here must understand that." One would expect that after all these performances, the headlines would be about Denner's brilliance on the pitch. But no, they were about something else entirely. Don't get me wrong, the media couldn't stop talking about his talent, but it was his bad boy persona that overshadowed it. In one incident, he showed up to training in a car riddled with bullet holes. Another time, he was caught hiding a blade in his sock, and rumours spread that he even planned to use it on a teammate. People gave him a new name, the Brilliant Vagabond, a genius with the ball, a troublemaker off it. Unfortunately, his rebellious reputation ended up costing him his place in the Brazilian national team. But not everyone gave up on him. Pepe, a 2-time World Cup winner, defended Denner, insisting the young star still deserved another chance, that in terms of raw talent, no player has ever gotten this close to Pelé. In the middle of all this madness, one thing became clear. If Dana wanted to save his career, he had to get out of Sao Paulo, out of the chaos, away from his old friends and old habits. So he reached out to Grêmio, a team that had always wanted him, but never had the money. Together they worked out a 3-month loan. And it turned out to be a brilliant move, with Dana even helping Grêmio win the Gaucho Championship. And this made his name and reputation grow even bigger, and so did his stock. When he returned to Portuguesa, the club simply couldn't afford him anymore. The president later admitted he was making more money than all his teammates combined. They were so desperate to keep him that they even considered something unthinkable, signing away the stadium in his name. The president half joked, maybe we should name the stadium after him, just to keep him here. But deep down, everyone knew it was impossible. Dana wouldn't stay at the club much longer. And in the midst of all this, Dana made a silly decision. One that would change his life forever. You see, Dana loved cars, always had. So when it came time to renew his contract, he told the club one thing. They had to get him a Mitsubishi Eclipse as a signing bonus. Now, you might think that was an easy request, but in Brazil at the time? Impossible. Strict import laws meant hardly anyone even had that car, yet somehow, Dana got it. Shiny, rare, powerful. His license plate proudly read, Dana 10. The car became famous, but little did he know, the choices he made that day would set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately end his life. Meanwhile, while all this was unfolding in Sao Paulo, something was happening in Rio de Janeiro, something that would seal his fate. In 1989, a man named Eurico Miranda led Brazil to their first Copa America in 40 years. But soon, he left the job to focus on Vasco da Gama, where he was vice president. 2 years later, Jair Pereira, the coach who gave Brazil 2 under-20 World Cups, lost his job at Real Madrid after getting into a fight with the president. Miranda saw an opportunity. He picked up the phone and asked one question. Jair, do you want to be a champion with me? Jair agreed, but with one demand. Bring me Dina. For Dana, it was the perfect escape. One of Brazil's biggest clubs. A fresh image. Powerful allies. With both Miranda and Jair backing him, 2 men who held influence over the national team. His dream of playing in the 1994 World Cup suddenly felt within reach. For once, it looked like he had chosen the right path. But destiny had other plans. On his first day of training, Dina was so excited that when Jair told the players to run around the pitch, he blasted off at full speed. By the time he reached the corner flag, he slipped, hit his head and passed out, to the great amusement of his new teammates. But that same energy carried on to the pitch. And what happened next became one of the most iconic moments of his career. It was against Newell's Old Boys. The focus should have been on Maradona, his first game back after months out injured. But Dina had other plans. 6 minutes in, he picked up the ball, dribbled past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 defenders, and only narrowly missed the goal. Maradona could only shake his head in disbelief. And it didn't stop there. His performance was so dazzling that the next day, even Argentine newspapers had Dina on the cover. But nothing topped what happened afterward. Maradona himself barged into the locker room, asking to meet the kid who had humiliated defenders. He shook Dana's hand, the ultimate seal of approval. Of course, Dana couldn't resist bragging to his teammates. Did Maradona ever ask to meet you? Didn't think so. Even 3 years later, when his teammate Rad Ross joined Newell's, people were still talking about that young boy who left Maradona stunned. It was ironic. His most iconic match ended without a single goal. But maybe that was fitting. Dina himself once said, "Sometimes the dribble is more beautiful than the goal." And in those few months at Vasco, Dina was in some of the best form of his career. His performances were so impressive that by the end of the season, the fans had no choice. They started chanting his name. It's Cafu, it's Cafu. Dina is a mix of Garrincha and Pelé. On the surface, it looked like the peak of his career. But underneath, Dina was living through one of the darkest chapters of his life. He already had 3 children, and though he provided for their mother, he never married her. He was open about seeing other women. Then, just 1 month after arriving at Vasco, tragedy struck. His girlfriend at the time was killed by a car during Carnival. Still, even in grief, his football carried on. Just 2 months later, his brilliance earned him his first move to Europe. At the end of the season, Stuttgart signed him for $3 million. But that move would never happen. 3 days after putting pen to paper, just 16 days after his 23rd birthday, Denner made a fateful choice. He had returned to Sao Paulo for contract talks and already had a plane ticket for the next morning. But he refused to leave behind his beloved Mitsubishi Eclipse. He insisted on driving back to Rio that very night. His family begged him to stay. But Denny wouldn't listen. Earlier that year, he had befriended a man named Otto Miranda, a convicted arms dealer, an alleged drug trafficker, and close friend of Romario and Edmundo. That night, Denner brought Otto along for the ride. Otto promised they would take turns driving. Before leaving, Denner picked up the phone and called one of his closest friends, goalkeeper Edinho, Pele's son. The two had met years earlier, and this call felt different. Denner kept telling him how much he loved him. Edinho swears to this day it sounded like Denner knew what was coming. At 5 a.m, just 20 minutes from home, Otto fell asleep at the wheel. The car veered off the road and hit a tree. They weren't even going fast. But tragedy has its own timing. Otto survived with 2 broken legs. Denner wasn't so lucky. He'd leaned his seat too far back. On impact, the seatbelt pressed against his throat, rupturing his larynx. He choked on his own blood before help could arrive. Cameras reached the scene before the paramedics. Across Brazil, the image of Dina's lifeless body, face covered with newspapers, left the nation in shock. 13 days later, Ayrton Senna died at Imola. It became the darkest month in Brazil's sporting history. As if fate wasn't cruel enough, Dina's family spent years in court for his insurance money, because Vasco hadn't completed the paperwork before his death. And just months later, Otto himself was assassinated.